I came to Kansas in 1974. Now, one of the earliest trips in my profession as an extension specialist for the state of Kansas in landscape and environmental horticulture was driving through Belle Plaine. As I drove through this small community, I noticed the gates in front of what is the Arboretum. And the Arboretum, I didn't know it was there, but the gates told me something, what's behind there. So I turned around, I sneaked in, and I felt I was at a place which was enchanted. It reminded me of Europe. Not that I was sentimental, but knowing European gardens, I felt there was a touch of home, of something which I did not expect in Kansas. I had seen Kansas, I'd seen the wheat fields. This was different. This was a garden, a landscape in a way which I had not seen before. Here were mature trees, not small trees, big trees. Look at them.
On the short grass prairie of Sumner County, Kansas, trees are few. Willows fringe the creek beds, shelter belts of Osage orange shield winter wheat from wind. Cottonwoods stand guard along farm lanes. But these are the familiar trees, native or adapted to the extremes of weather on the southern plains. This is the story of an unlikely wonderland that sprang to life on the Kansas prairie, a fable that rose from a dream, a tale of an untimely death and an enchanted garden, a country doctor and a country singer, a wrong turn in the right direction, and 100 years of hard work and happenstance. The story begins with the doctor, Walter E. Bartlett.
My grandfather grew up on a farm in Sumner County, south of Wellington, Kansas. And from the day he was born, he loved to be outdoors. He loved nature, and consequently, when he went to study medicine in St. Louis, he spent most of his off hours studying trees and flowers and the flora and the fauna of the Missouri Botanic Gardens and Shaw's Gardens.
And when he returned to Kansas to set up a practice in Belle Plaine, he married May and had a son, Glenn. He brought his passions for botany and beauty with him. In 1910, the year his daughter Maxine was born, Doc bought the 15-acre town dump. On this barren patch of land, he began to build an athletic park for Glenn, who was a fine athlete, and his schoolmates. Within weeks, he had dredged a pond, built a bridge, and Bartlett's Park began to take shape.
Dr. Bartlett used to get kids to come and work, and then for all their work that they did in the Arboretum, then he would let them either go boating or sometimes swimming or fishing in the pond. That's the way he got a lot of help that he wouldn't ordinarily have gotten.
In 1917, when Glenn went off to war, Doc's vision for the place began to change. He planted more trees, laid out more beds. A talented local schoolgirl named Margaret Myers designed a formal garden. People began to come for picnics, field days, weddings, and reunions. The place was now known as Bartlett Arboretum. Fighting in France as a company commander, Glenn was wounded. He would survive his injuries, but tragedy would strike the Bartlett family from an unexpected quarter. Sister Maxine, just 7 years old, died in the diphtheria epidemic of 1918. Glenn, recuperating in a French hospital, was heartbroken.
My dear father, I have just received your letter announcing the saddest event that could ever befall me, the death of my beautiful little sister Maxine. If anything should happen to me over here, it is my wish that some fitting remembrance be left her, beautiful as she was.
Glenn returned to fulfill his wish. Every spring from that time until this, 40,000 tulips have bloomed in his sister's memory. In 1937, Doc suffered a heart attack. With his death, the Arboretum's fate hung in the balance. Son Glenn, living comfortably with his wife Margaret on Long Island, was now a landscape architect. Margaret, the same girl who had designed the formal garden so long before, was an artist and a clothing designer on Madison Avenue. No one expected these sophisticates to return to rural Kansas.
Mother was a flower arranger and taught classes in New York City. My father used to send plants and things back to his father here at the Arboretum, and it was always an interest, and so there was just no question that they would come back here and take over this property.
The Arboretum had cast its spell. Glenn and Margaret jumped at the chance, rolling into town with big dreams and 2 little girls. They took up residence in the tiny carriage house on the grounds. For the first time, guided by a master plan, the new stewards set to work. Before long, Bartlett Arboretum was on the map. Too soon, the clouds of a new war in Europe and the Pacific shadowed their dreams. Glenn and Margaret couldn't get bulbs or plants. Labor was scarce. Rationing made travel a rarity. They were forced to close the gates. After the war, tourism took off, and roadside America was born. But it began to seem that the magic of the dream, the marvel of the formal garden on the plains, had faded. The great gates stayed locked. Margaret worked at Boeing. Glenn took landscape jobs. But for the anniversary of Kansas statehood in 1961, the garden might have gone the way of the small family farm, of abandoned prairie towns inhabited only by wind. Caught up in the centennial excitement, Glenn and Margaret dusted off their master plan from the 30s. They built bridges, gazebos, tool sheds, replanted the beds. The crowds returned. Rare was the child within 100 miles who didn't take a field trip to the park. Couples were wed beneath its bowers. Thousands marked the turning of the seasons, and for a good long while, the dream held. When Glenn and Margaret's strength waned, the family legacy passed to the Bartlett sisters, Glenna and Mary. With Mary's husband, Bob Gourlay, they made the Arboretum their life's work. After almost 100 years of tending this uncommon garden, now a grove of elder trees, the Bartlett family had to admit that it was simply too much.
Belle Plaine has been around for 85 years. June 5th, the era ends.
Well, the attendance is definitely down over the last, probably 10 years, to the point where it's just not profitable to try to keep going.
The news doesn't sit well with the visitors.
Naturally, as long as we've come here, we don't think much of that idea, but we're not the ones that has to do all that work.
There was no one left to take up the work. The place seemed fated to be a ghost garden, tended only by the spirits, Doc and May, Glenn and Margaret, Maxine and Glenna, those who had gone before. Finally, in 1995, The family hung a for sale sign on the historic gates. It's often said that there are only two major story plots. A stranger rides out of town, or a stranger rides into town. Here, it's the latter. In 1997, Dallas teacher and musician Robin Macy, a founding member of the Dixie Chicks, left the Walnut Valley Bluegrass Festival in Winfield. Outside Belle Plaine, she lost her way and a wrong turn took her past the for sale sign. Wondering what lay beyond the weed-grown gates, she stopped to peer in. And that was all it took.
Felt that there'd been these ghosts that were here that had spent hours and a lifetime creating something just for the joy of creating beauty. And I got it. I sensed it immediately. And it may have been a little overgrown and disheveled, but it had good bones. And I knew that. It was easy. I never thought twice. And I never owned anything. I'd lived in a rented space and drove a rented car. And I was 38 years old. And within literally less than an hour, I threw off my gypsy hat and put on the garden gloves, even though I didn't know squat. I didn't know anything about Latin or trees or viburnums or, I didn't know anything about botany. I was a willing student, and Mother Nature's the greatest teacher of all.
It takes a noble man to plant a seed for a tree that he might not ever even enjoy. A seed for a tree that will give shade to a man he may never meet.
At very first, I got to be honest with you, I was a little worried and concerned that Robin didn't quite understand what she had gotten herself into. But she now gets it, and we kind of joke about that a little bit, that she does understand the concept of Arboretum. She has a very good passion, very deep passion for this place. And we talk about collections that are already here. There's the Japanese maples, there's the dogwoods, there's the horse chestnuts. She has expanded those collections to include some of the new varieties that are out there. There's French tree collection, but she's actually starting to gather these plants and expand and restore the Arboretum to what it truly is, an expansion of plants, a collection of plants, and it'll be there for our knowledge for the next 100 years.
First of all, this is a ginkgo biloba, biloba, and you can see there's two parts to it.
Ginkgo biloba, planted by WCS, class of 2016, Green Team, October 2010.
I clearly now understand the word kindred spirit and how a family and a community can evolve because of a place. There's a circle of love, 15, 20 women, mostly women, a couple of men. I call them the Soil Sisters, and they are the volunteers that come here because it's like a magnetic force field. They are gardeners, outdoor enthusiasts, and they've adopted a little piece of this garden, much like a little piece of a quilt, to call their own. They're the heart and soul, the army of love, creating a renaissance for this place.
It's a treasure for our community as well as for me personally. It's get away from it all by taking a trip a few blocks away from your home is priceless, and it works.
Bartlett Arboretum is a place that has a community and a family of artists that come in all these different flavors, from writers to musicians to painters to gardeners, that all find the Arboretum as a palette for their individual talents, and we come together in Soil Sisters and create this family I always longed for, but didn't know how it would ever come to pass, but it has.
I am so happy that the Bartlett Arboretum has survived to see its 100th anniversary. Thank you, Mom and Robin, for making this possible. Wish I could be there. Sincerely, Tony Gorley. Thank you. When we sold the Arboretum, it was very traumatic for our family and myself. And Then we sold it to Robin Macy, and I felt like I hadn't lost an arboretum, I had gained another daughter.
Bartlett Arboretum begins its second century with deep roots and many branches. Now honorably listed on the National Registry of Historic Places, the Arboretum is home to 10 state champion trees, a treehouse concert series, and an annual Great Gatsby-esque garden party fundraiser. Neighbors and community volunteers donate time and service. Together, they bring new energy and are preserving a legacy, creating a living celebration of a timeless place.
Why do we come out and work ourselves to the bone? Sometimes I go home and I'm so tired, but it's sort of a euphoric feeling. We work somewhere where it's 100 years old, and every now and then you're clawing through something and you uncover and unearth something, and it's just unexpected and it's beautiful.
How long does happily ever after last? A year? A score? A century? When enchantment is the order of the day, who knows? For now, the work goes on. The dream is tended lovingly. The long spell holds.